Let's have a look at the Sankey diagram for the United States energy flow. Let's not worry about what quads are. They're quadrillion BTUs. They have an equivalent to joules, but the US is still using imperial in this. What's important is about the flow and where the energy is going, not what the actual units are in. Three of the energy sources are, of course, highly dirty, and we're trying to rid our society of these things: petroleum, coal, and gas. Now notice the vast majority of petroleum is going to cars, transportation, and some to industry. None of it really counts for our house because transportation covers our cars. Coal and natural gas, though, flow all over the place. Coal almost exclusively heads to electricity generation, while natural gas splits between electricity, home heating, and industrial processes. We have two iffy, kind of yellow alert energy sources. Biomass typically means burning wood, but in this percent of society, what's being done is ethanol is being made for gasoline substitution. So when you go to the gas pump, you will see it contains ethanol. Ethanol is what you can make out of corn if you're not planning to drink it. So it's a corn-based alcohol, and it supposedly is better than using gasoline. But as the numbers come in, biomass is proving to be not as good as we thought. Hydro is actually staggeringly destructive of the environment when it is built. But once the dam is up and it's been running for 50 years, the damage has been done. You might as well keep using it. So the US is not using a lot of hydro. These ones, of course, are considered our greenest, and you can see really don't contribute in significant ways to the US power grid. Nuclear, I've left with no assessment because we've built these nuclear plants, they're full of spent fuel. We've got to figure out a way to dispose of them for the next 100,000 years. It is the cleanest, greenest energy source ever made, unless something goes wrong, and if we can't find out what to do with the waste. So continuing to allow them to operate, it's just adding a few more pounds of waste on top of the mess we've already made. So I'm not even going to discuss nuclear. When we look at the destination of these energies, we can see 27% goes to cars, 25% to factories, and really actually not a lot. Under 20% goes for businesses and houses. So seems pretty obvious the target should be petroleum. We need to deal with our cars if we want to cut energy use. Oddly enough, the US still makes very heavy use of coal. That's the nastiest material to burn. And so they still have a strong coal dependency. The embarrassing part for humans is this. Energy services means useful energy. Rejected energy means we wasted it. We couldn't currently use it. So out of the 100% US energy flow, 40% of it basically gets used and 60% gets thrown away. That is incredibly wasteful. And it's just built into our technology and our attitudes. We need to improve that. Cars being one of the single worst contributors to that. Okay? Look at the green line going into transportation. Look at the waste line leaving. Look at the blue line and the orange line ending our houses and the size of the line leaving. You can see roughly which processes conserve the most energy and which ones threw a lot away. When we look at Canada, don't worry about the thickness of the lines. We're a smaller country and the units are different. The distribution is what's interesting. We still waste energy the same level the Americans do. I don't know why we have a non-energy component, what we're doing with that. I'd have to research it. But basically, we have the same distribution. 25% going to our cars, 14% going to our houses. And our waste is slightly better. 49% wasted, 48% used. So we are a more energy efficient society than the Americans. We've put in more effort to deal with waste. We're at about a 50-50 versus 60-40. This part is about 13% of the total. We only use 13% of our energy nationwide in our houses. Of that, only 4% of the 13% goes to lighting. 4% of this 13% is 0.5%. Out of all this energy flowing through Canada, 0.5% goes to lighting our houses. We cannot save the world by plunging it into darkness. And it's even less effective than you would imagine. In 2005, Ontario was still getting 20% of its electricity from coal, 8% from natural gas, and nuclear and water are more or less carbon free. Why do I say more or less? Nuclear power releases nothing to the environment when it's working. Even if it fails, it will not add CO2. Hydropower is technically not CO2 producing, but when you build the dams and you flood thousands of square kilometers of forest and make the trees die and rot, the construction of water power creates a lot of CO2. But the dams have been in Ontario for a long time. Look what happened by 2015. Coal vanished. The single worst fuel we could burn went from being 20% of Ontario's electrical production coming from it to none, and solar, wind, and bioenergy now make up 10%. And the other three sources picked up the slack. Half of the energy that we got from coal is now coming from green sources. That's a pretty impressive change in 10 years' time. Much more than I thought we could achieve. But these two differences means turning out your lights have even less effect. From the previous slide, it is only 4% is lighting. Up to 20% if we include our utilities. So at max, your electric use in your house is 20% of your house budget, which is only 13% of the nation's budget. So that means 20% of 13% means your house, all the houses could be 0.26% of our national energy use. However, of that 0.26% of the national energy used to light our houses, in Ontario, only 10% of that energy generation comes from a fossil fuel. So we are now looking at 20% of 13%, and only 10% of that is troublesome. So that means your house electricity use is only 0.026% of the carbon fuel budget of our nation. And that's all the electricity in your house, appliances and others. So turning off the lights and thinking you have saved the nation is a dangerous belief. As long as you drive a car and heat your house with gas, you are a carbon furnace. And all the electricity savings in the world will not alter that. Does this mean we do nothing? Absolutely not. What it means is we must do something that matters, and that's what's next.